Welcome back to Restoring Sean, and today, you guys, today is the big one. As today, July 3rd, we wrap up the complete first season of Restoring Sean with episode 15, Lessons from the Manor. And that means one more thing. We are about to be finished with the Manor. As you've watched the bathroom behind me come together over the last 3 months and progress, so too have you watched the Manor progress from what it was when I purchased it to what it was when I sold it. In this very special first season finale, we are going to dive a little bit more in depth on a personal level from what it took to make this house a home and the lessons that I learned in it. If you're new to the channel, I post a new video every Wednesday morning where I do some sort of half sprint into the work involved in restoring my very first house, the Manor. All opinions are my own, never assume I have the correct answer, and did you know, while living in the Manor, I got hooked on the video game Fortnite and have since spent a couple $100s on useless crap in it? Sadly, now you do. Let's get started. Since launching this channel in March, I have had several people reach out to me asking how long it took me to put all of this together. The answer to that is not easily reached because there was never a definite date that I sat down and started, pulling things from the past. I shared some before and after photos of the Manor on Instagram and Facebook from mid-2018 until mid-2020. But apart from that, I never shared a ton of progress photos. This was partly because I didn't think that people really liked seeing the ugly part of the process. Now I know people do like the ugly part. And partly because I was just lazy. Those ugly photos existed on my phone, but at some point I started deleting what I deemed unimportant and moved the rest of it to my computer. In the fall of 2022, when I was finally able to leave retail for a job that allowed me to work from home, this freed up enough mental space for me to kind of sit and spend time and think about the creative side of my life and what I wanted to do to be creative again. That started with me thinking about the Manor and ultimately restoring Sean. I must have spent hours, in all actuality days, but really it was weeks, or rather months, but essentially 2 years, compiling what you saw in 13 videos that encompassed the Manor, preceding what you're watching right now. So many photos had been lost to time. There were so many things that were deleted over the years, thinking that I was never going to need them. I reached out to friends and family for any photos or videos that they might have, and when that ended up proving not as useful as I thought, or at least what they sent me I already had, I turned to scouring the dozen or so text chains in my phone that I never delete, like for my best friends and my family. I never delete those. Most of them go back to 2014, and luckily I only needed to go back to 2018. After that, it was going through the text chains on my MacBook and my desktop. Luckily, they were all saved there as well. And then it was looking into conversations with old coworkers, random friends, whoever, and seeing in the off chance, were there photos and videos of the Manor that I had sent them and to no one else. And this was a very common thing. Since I deleted my Facebook in the fall of 2020, that was a non-starter. But luckily, Instagram archives all of your stories that you've ever posted. So I was able to go back through my stories and either screen record the videos or screen grab photos that I had taken. Once I had everything, it was all dumped into a folder, and then that was broken out into rooms, and then those rooms had to be organized in an order that made sense, not necessarily from project perspective, but timeline. When did that room start? When did that room end? And that's when I came up with the format for we're just gonna go through the lifespan of when you were in the house. So then those rooms became episodes, and that's how I determine what I was going to do for this video series. It was a very long, arduous process that continued even into me filming the videos, as I have posted to YouTube and still found images that should have been included in those that I had not found by the time of filming. None of them were like, groundbreaking photos and, they were gonna change the narrative or anything, but it was a bummer not to be able to include them. But that just illustrates to you how much time this whole thing took. It was not I'm just gonna sit down and do this. This has been 2 years in the making. So, since this is the final episode of season 1 of Restoring Sean, aka Restoring the Manor, I wanted to break it down into 3 parts. In part 1, I wanted to take the time to do actual before and after side-by-side photos of the work that went into the rooms based on listing photos. In part 2, I'm going to go over some of the questions you guys have posed over the last few weeks or months, so I can give a little bit additional insight to what some of you have been wondering about. And then finally in part 3, the most personal part of this, my takeaways from living in the manor. Starting with the exterior. The goal was to clean it up and make the manor pop from its surroundings. By simplifying the color palette from a dated brown, turquoise, and white to a rich blue, which was Dark Night by Sherwin-Williams, and then a fresh coat of pure white paint for the trim, the house looked sharp and inviting and not closed off and foreboding as it had before. Rebuilding the front deck and making it wider added balance to the front of the house and the covered porch that was right justified. With the new landscaping, removing the boardwalk and raised flower beds, and then adding ornamental grasses made the 106-year-old structure seem modernized. Painting the fence in iron ore successfully caused it to vanish behind the plants and surrounding things as intended, so that the focus was not on the fence but on the house instead. On the front porch, removing the screens that were torn and dirty allowed for clean views of the neighborhood and opened up the porch itself. While having nice screens in place certainly would have prevented bugs, the wood frames were cracked and worn and definitely not original to the house. I painted the original beadboard ceiling in here as well as the floor, bringing a lightness to them both that made the space feel a little bit less dramatic. And then finally, the new screen door increased, the general feeling of openness to the house itself rather than feeling closed off from the street and visitors and private. I wanted it to be friendly and inviting. Over in the side yard, removing the structures and rain barrels and random wood planks also resulted in the removal of all raspberry bushes and assorted vegetation. In its place, a custom patio filled the void and created room for entertaining and enjoying the sun in the morning and the shade in the afternoon. The fence was tall enough and the lot had enough trees that it always felt private in the side yard. And while the arbor was now painted white, the red pop of my umbrella still brought that little bit of energy to the back. Speaking of the back, gone was the mud and weed patch from when I moved in, and brought to life was an actual backyard. After cleaning the mound off to the right there from all of the logs and forgotten lumber, the actual plants on it could thrive again. You can see a bit toward the garage that there was a hammock back there given to me when the cool neighbors moved away. With the replaced bamboo fence beyond the amazing oak tree, it was a sanctuary of a yard that felt open and clean. Plus, you know how I loved using that fire pit, and it definitely got its use over the course of 3 summers. For the garage, this is perhaps the biggest of contrasts. The driveway was still gravel, of course, but gone was the rundown and dilapidated appearance of what could have been a crack den. Removing the rotting panels of OSB that flanked the garage door and replacing them with cedar siding to match the original wood brought unity back to the garage. And then adding fresh paint to the door in the exterior accent color of iron ore matched it to the fence here and at the front of the house as well. New white trim, a new but unseen roof, and a door that actually could open and close made it much less creepy back there. Still not a place you'd want to hang out in, as it was still in an alley, but it was a pretty garage. Back inside the house, we have the only bathroom. I know these before pictures are not the awful lime green paint that it was when I bought it, but seeing as I didn't take those photos, we have these. Apart from the door frame and the 2 pieces of baseboards, the trim in the bathroom no longer existed and I had to add it back. By painting the walls with my favorite color in the house, Cape Verde, that took the energy out and replaced it with something velvety and soothing. with a new toilet, new shelving, a new medicine cabinet and lighting, fresh paint on the vanity, and matching that to repainting the clawfoot tub. The bathroom was grounded and serene. And then on the opposite side of the room, with a mixture of glass pieces and ceramic urns, a few succulents and wicker baskets, there was a slight apothecary vibe that invoked this kind of feeling of history, but with a modern twist. In the primary bedroom, the picture before really speaks for itself. It was just a dark pit. Painting the walls in the color drizzle was the first step, sticking with the water-themed color names and tones. The fresh white angled ceiling gave the room this kind of strangely infinite feeling, despite the small scale of it, with my tall headboard in a grid-tufted basket weave fabric and flanked by charcoal gray lampshades that matched the iron ore balcony door. The room was simple but elegant. The drapery rod, as in all rooms, is hung nearly flush with the ceiling to draw the eye upward and create a general kind of feeling of height. And then finally, the dark wood floors and side tables match the ceiling fan, unifying the space. At the front of the house in the office, I wanted to get rid of the high gloss ivory paint that adorned so many of the surfaces. This meant taking the blue baseboards to white, more fresh white for the trim work, and then bringing in river white as the color for the walls. Finding the closet door still hiding out in the garage was a major win for me, as it was just as simple as a light sanding, painting it, and putting it back where it belonged. I should have replaced the ceiling light with a fan. I hate boob lights like that, but we'll just tuck it away with whatever else was left unsaid and undone with the Manor. The tiny little guest bedroom. Similar to the office, I had to get rid of the ivory glossy paint. The challenge here with the room being so small was not necessarily to make it feel bigger, because that would be impossible, but to make it feel cozy. Accentuating the arched ceiling brought the immediate character to the space, and mounting the drape rod so high framed the windows in a way that they themselves felt like a headboard for the queen-sized bed. The walls were painted starboard, and mounting the lights to the wall freed up much needed space on the already small nightstand. Closet door was given a latch as it tended to swing inward, and considering this was arguably the most haunted room in the house, oops, I cannot say anything else on that. You will have to tune in on October 30th for the rest of that information. Moving downstairs to the foyer, we see the space that greeted guests when they arrived. Gone were the vibrant yellow and orange walls, sparking too much of the wrong kind of energy that I simply didn't want. Painting the walls requisite gray cooled it all down, and when matched with pure white trim, Kona stain for the handrail and floors, and iron ore for the newel post and front door, it felt appropriately moody and neutral. To add life back in, we have the pop of color from the original stained glass windows, the brass leaf-themed ceiling pendant, and the brass pineapple lamp. The lamp is sitting on a stack of my own books, the Onyxus Chronicles, that I wrapped in brown paper to create a neutral base. Quick tip. Just like you did in high school, if you are a millennial or older, if you want to create height and dimension, but your books are perhaps crazy colors or the titles are not ones that you would want displayed in a living room or, in this case, a foyer, wrapping them in brown paper bags from the grocery store is a super easy, cheap, efficient way to have neutral props in your house. If you want to stack things, if you want to do them in a row, whatever. It's a great way to do that. Oh boy, well, it didn't get more top to bottom than the kitchen. It started with tearing all of the sheetrock down from the ceiling in what I hoped would be a way to expose the beams, but ultimately in a way that revealed all of the knob and tube wiring. With help from my family, we got rid of the singular can light and replaced it with 6 of them and a massive new ceiling fan. A little bit of wiring work moved the 4-socket power outlet from the middle of the wall above the stove to behind it, and then wiring fed up the wall to add an exhaust hood and light. The iron ore color was chosen first for the kitchen, and that is what subsequently led to the color being used throughout the house, inside and out. New brass hardware gave slight warmth to the cabinets, but played nicely off the restained floors. The walls were painted French gray to get rid of that electric blue sponge paint, and of course, the trim all in pure white. The kitchen, while large, was very small in workspace and functionality, so keeping your items organized and minimal on the counters was paramount to making it feel like a nicer space. Plus, I had a pantry to hide everything in, so that helped too. I hate light green, specifically like, I don't know, tropical green, creamy citrus lime green. As I'm dramatic and wanted to express it as such, black paint was my go-to for the dining room and the living room, here being Black Magic by Sherwin-Williams. Adding that massive brass drapery rod not only raised the visual height of the room, but also lengthened it. And then with family help, the upper portion of the built-in was gutted, and the sconces from the front were removed and repurposed as can lights in the ceiling. I don't know what the original look of this built-in was, but it was definitely different from what existed when I moved in. Behind the mirror is beadboard, but the whole space was designed to be able to showcase that beautiful Egan mirror from Pottery Barn. The white trim and dark floors in Kona tied into the ceiling and the fan, keeping the space tidy with a neutral rug and its geometric pattern. And finally, we end where we began, the living room. Exactly as the dining room, you understand the color choices in here. Just as in the dining room, the drapery rod had the same effect. From a design perspective, this room configuration happened after I stained the floors 6 months earlier, and it was my favorite layout of the space. It's not always the best idea to angle things. This space, it worked that way because it opened up a direct path from the front door to the dining room rather than having to navigate around furniture. This way, I could also tuck a table behind the gray sofa, building out a vignette of apothecary cloches with vintage books, a small black salt lamp, and a couple of other items I'd collected over the years. The wall is broken up with vintage black and brass prints of astronomy devices, and the brass frames add an interesting sheen against the wall for the gallery presentation. With the simplicity of colors in the room, I could also tie the pop of color from the original stained glass into the print on the wall and the salt lamp, and then the green pillows to the green leather ottoman as well. And that is that when it comes to the before and after photos and the end of part 1. Over the last couple months of sharing these videos, I've had a couple questions get lobbed my way from friends and family. And then the other day on Instagram, I posted a story asking if anyone in general had questions or about things that they were wondering about the experience or takeaways from the Manor, and I wanted to take a moment to answer these questions now. What was your favorite part of the Manor once you had it completed and that made you feel the most accomplished? That's tricky because there are two things. First, I think my favorite part of the Manor was the dining room because I loved sitting in there and working on my laptop anytime. I finished writing my book series in there. I loved having people over for meals. That was my favorite space. But what made me feel the most accomplished was the patio in the side yard, sheerly from a labor perspective and how hard it was to make that. And regardless of however it has held up in the years since, which I don't know how it held up, it looked great when it was done. If you could go back and do it again, would you? In a heartbeat, yes. I don't truly regret anything about that house. I'm curious how it would have been if I had continued to live there another year or two, but I'm also glad that I got out when I did because the city did a massive road replacement, road work, sidewalk replacement project in the summer of 2021, and that would have been slapped onto my property taxes. So thanks, but no thanks on that. But owning the house and fixing it, yes, I would absolutely do that again. I'd change things for sure, but I would do it again. What's your favorite memory in the Manor? This is a tough one because my true favorite memory has to be saved for the Halloween episode, October 30th. However, an alternate favorite memory would be when my friend Jonathan and I reconnected in May of 2020 after a year of being completely absent from each other's lives. We had had a few too many drinks out on the patio. We actually spent the day kind of drinking on my patio, and there were protests that had started in Minneapolis, and the city enacted a curfew. Jonathan, in his state, was not going to be able to drive home in time to escape the curfew. So I said, well, why don't you just stay? Let's make dinner, just hang out. There's the guest room, obviously. So he stayed the evening, and we ate and drank more and ultimately put on high heels and danced and sang karaoke on YouTube in my living room until 3 a.m. when our voices were hoarse and we couldn't go on any longer. That was a formative memory in our friendship in general, but truly it was just one of the most fun, uninhibited nights I have had in my adult life. Are there certain brands you would endorse if you could? You may have heard me mention Sherwin-Williams once or twice, so probably them. What do you regret doing in the house? While I don't regret owning the house, there are several things that I semi-regret. I regret using screws to attach the baseboards to the walls instead of nails, because if those screws didn't go into a stud, the head of the screw stuck out on the baseboard and you could always see it. And I would try to cover it with caulking and paint, but you could always see it and it just looked really shitty. I regret using caulk on everything when in a lot of cases I should have used wood putty. When I was redoing the trim on the bathroom window and I had taken it all down, I broke the sash for the original window, and the sash is basically it's like a rope and pulley and weight system, so when you lift the window up, you know, the weights are down and it helps keep the window in place. I broke it and I should have fixed it, but I didn't, and I just put the trim back up, and I regret that. I should have had the grass in the front yard go all the way to the cement walkway, and I don't know why I didn't. Opting instead for that stupid lane of mulch on either side. And I also regret not taking more time to bury the black garden trim better than I did, because I did a really bad job and it was all coming up by the time I moved away. Did you steal the street sign in your backyard? No, I did not steal the street sign. I lived on Newton Avenue, and I guess in like the winter of 2016 into 17, there was a snowstorm and someone lost control of their car and took out the street sign post. I would have to assume it was the crafty lesbians that owned the house before me that went running down there to take the street name off the post and keep it and mount it to the fence in the backyard. I essentially just left it in place because I'm not a snitch, and really I think I just repositioned it to a different spot on the same wall that they had hung it, and that's how there was a street sign back there. Would you change anything you did? I would have tried harder from a design perspective to make the interior of the house warmer. At the time, it all felt great and cool, and I loved it. But looking back on the pictures now, there's a certain sterile feeling in what I had created that I didn't realize at the time. Back then, I was a big fan of simplicity everywhere in the house, apart from my office, which I considered like the fun space. But that simplicity always ended up looking tidy, and I like tidy. The downside is that it looks too organized to touch. And when I would have friends or family over, people were too afraid to really make themselves comfortable because they didn't want to disturb the pillows or the throw that was on the sofa. You know, I guess they didn't want to like disturb the scene. But that is not the case in this house. I also, and this is probably like a huge gasp from people, but I also, instead of refinishing the wood floors upstairs, I would have carpeted the bedrooms. It just feels nice underfoot, and it's cozy. And when you have cats with gray and white hair, there are just tumbleweeds of cat fur everywhere. So I probably would have done carpeting upstairs. When you sold the manor, did the new owners have an inspection, and did they ask for any of your stuff? They did have an inspection, yes, and I believe the only thing they asked me to do or correct was the crater that was in the middle of the garage floor, because with no rebar when the garage was built, it had collapsed and it was like a 3 foot by 3 foot, like pretty severe divot in the garage floor. So they wanted me to fix it or provide the money for them to fix it. And I think my realtor and I just suggested to them that we would knock off $500 from their purchase price, and they agreed, which was great, because it would have cost a lot more than $500 to fix that. In regards to my stuff, the only thing that they wanted, and they did express surprise that it was not staying with the house, was the mirror in the built-in, my big Egan brass mirror. The contract specifically stated that the mirror came with me. I did end up finding the mirror at a couple stores around the country that still had it, and it could be shipped. And I think even the store in St. Paul at the time, which was, I don't know, a 30-minute drive from the house, not even 30 minutes, they still had it, and it was super clearance and on sale. They didn't want that, and I thought, well, I could go buy it. So I said, you can have my mirror for $700, and they said no. So I took the mirror with me because that was my plan. Did the new owners change anything in the house that you know of? The only thing I know that they did for sure was install these stupid, gigantic, Comic Sans looking street numbers up the front pillar of the porch. And I just think it's the dumbest looking thing ever. I get that like maybe the smaller scale of the address plate that I had installed wasn't super easy to see from the street. But if people are coming to your house and they've never been there before, Google and Apple and whatever other map service is pretty good at indicating where the house is. So it's really not that hard to find. And also saying it's the dark blue house by the corner. It's the only one. Last week I was out in Minneapolis for the first time in a year though, and I decided that I should probably go and take a look at the house just to see. So here is the Manor as it exists now. So right now we are driving up Penn Avenue, which is the rough street that things happened on. There's the Manor peeking out. There's the garage. And there she is, my beautiful lady, existing as she did. And a lot of weeds. Are you excited to talk about the next house? Yes and no. The next house, the ranch, was not necessarily the happiest place to live in from day one. There were a lot of things that went wrong there, from the house itself having issues, to me having medical issues, to relationship issues when that happened, to massive work issues, and on and on. I never felt like I could catch a break when I was living in the ranch. And since moving away, really since moving into that house, I have neglected to look back on it because I just haven't wanted to. But that's not the point of this channel, and I do have to look back. I will say one thing I am excited to move on from is discussing quarantine and COVID and what I did during it, because I am so sick of talking about that. Not in a like, oh, this memory is too painful sort of way, because for me it's not. Ultimately, like, the summer of 2020 ended up being one of the best summers of my life. I'm just sick of it, and I'm tired of going back to it and being like, and then during quarantine I did this. So I'm ready to move on. I don't want to talk about my reasoning behind working on my house being due to quarantine. It should be the truth. And the truth has been, and probably always will be, because I essentially have no social life and I'm single and nothing else to do. But in short, yes, I am excited to crack that egg open and reacquaint myself with the ranch. What happened with the hoarder house next door? So the hoarder house was purchased for $75,000 cash offer. I know I may have mentioned before that the junk hauler told me that his boss offered the people $20,000. That wasn't true. I looked it up. So $75,000 cash. The former owner could take out whatever she wanted to keep, and she could leave behind whatever she didn't want. After making buddies with the junk hauler that was hired to clean the house out, I was able to take a tour of it during his process, and he brought me upstairs so I could see all of the things. And the smell of cat pee was so overwhelming, and a lot of the bottles of soda that you see here that were lying around were filled with human urine and spit from chewing tobacco, because there was no bathroom upstairs, so they just did that. The guy told me that he was allowed to keep anything he wanted, which to me looked like nothing but trash, but he'd already found something like $300 in cash lying around in random spots. There was like a brand new TV in the box, a PlayStation, all sorts of stuff that he could pawn off. So if you have the stomach for that work, good for you. The house was listed a couple weeks later for $125,000, but it took 2 months to eventually sell for $115,000. They'd reduced the price. It was a cute house with a lot of potential, but it would have been a total gut inside, floors and walls, to get rid of the cat pee. This was on top of the literal trees that had grown in the gutters and then under the roof, and the resulting water damage from that. What did you learn about the home buying and home selling process? I remember going into home buying and thinking, oh my God, this is the single most important, biggest wildest thing you will ever do in your life and nothing will ever compare to it. That sentiment only exists once when you're buying your house for the first time. Because now, owning my third house, you are just annoyed with the process and how much paperwork there is, how much information you have to hunt down and provide to the mortgage lender and the bank and the underwriting team and this and this and this. And it's just like, oh my God, just sign, let me sign this shit. Of course, it is a big deal to buy a house, and I don't want to diminish that for anyone that's purchasing a house for the first time. It is a very big deal and it is very exciting. I just think after the first one, for subsequent houses, it is a million times easier. You know what to expect, you know what you're doing. You don't have to take those dumb online courses about first-time homeowners and what to do with the responsibility of paying a mortgage, because like for the most part, most of us have been paying egregious amounts of money in rent for several years prior to owning a house. So we get what the financial responsibility is. And then what I learned was selling. I learned, and this was when the cool neighbors were selling their house, I learned that in Minneapolis, you have to have what is called a truth in housing inspection when it is time to sell your house. And this thing is total bullshit. It is a contractor who, he doesn't work for the city, or they, I shouldn't say he. They don't necessarily work for the city, they work in conjunction with them. So you pay them $300 to come into your house, and they kind of give it like a look over and make sure that there's nothing insane about like you're missing a wall, or like your power outlets are hanging out of the walls, or the ceiling collapsed from water damage. Like they're looking for obvious issues and a few other things, but it's basically paying an inspector to inspect your house so that you can then sell it. That's it. I'm sure this exists in other cities around the country. I had never heard of it. I didn't know that when I bought the house, so that's probably something you should ask when you buy. Is there a truth in housing inspection that I'm gonna have to fork cash over for when it comes time to sell? Okay, last question. Was it difficult to move from a place that you had spent so much time and care in designing? In a word, leaving the manor was heartbreaking. I loved that house. I loved how quiet it could be and how content I felt inside of it after the first few months. I loved the appreciation from the neighbors that would call out to me when I'd be working outside on painting it or working on the yard, and they'd be walking by and they'd call out their, great job, or it's looking so good. I loved that. I will still lay in bed at night. This isn't every night, of course, but occasionally I'll lay in bed at night trying to fall asleep, and I will think about, if money had been unlimited, what would I have done to the manor? But in the end, I had to look at the manor as if it were a relationship that just didn't work out. And it makes me think of that saying about how some people, or houses in this case, were meant to stay in your heart and not your life. And that was the manor. The manor was one of the great loves of my life, and it lives on in the silences between my thoughts. When I purchased the manor in May of 2018, I paid $180,000 for it. I refinanced it a year later to lower my mortgage payment a bit, and then on July 31st, 2020, I listed the house for $249,900. Because the market was so hot at that point, which pales in comparison to today, but because the market was what it was, there was a knee-jerk reaction from my realtor, and he is my friend, and he sold my second house, so I have no qualms here at all. There was a knee-jerk reaction that because the house hadn't sold in the first couple days, we needed to drop the price. So on August 3rd, we dropped the price of the manor to $219,000. 4 days later, 1 week after listing the house, I accepted an offer for $236,000. In hindsight, I wish that I had held out just a week longer at the elevated price just to see what happened. But what's done is done, and in the end, the house did earn me $56,000. That paid off 2 credit cards for me. It got my down payment for the next house, and it had a little bit of money left over for a new sofa. This season on Restoring Sean, I've alluded a few times to the reasons behind why I sold the manor, And there's really no single one direct answer. But to get a little personal here and to risk freaking people out in the process, I will share the three factors that led to my decision. First, I am not a city person. As much as I wish I was and as much as I want to be, I'm just not. And at the time, at 34 years old, I was pretty set in my ways of who I was, and I wasn't going to be changing. My proximity to Minneapolis proper was incredibly convenient. If I wanted to go downtown, I could get to the heart of it in 8 minutes. But I never went downtown. I went downtown maybe once a month. I did not take advantage of that. And being in such close proximity to downtown or Minneapolis proper, there was a lot of crime in the neighborhood. There was a lot of danger, to put it mildly. There was a lot of danger. And you can look at what safety means from a variety of standpoints. The gunshots at night, cars speeding down the street at like 70 miles an hour through the stop signs, robberies, and then literally 2 blocks behind the house on Penn Avenue, a little girl was struck by a stray bullet from a car, and it ultimately killed her. So it just was not a safe neighborhood. And regardless of what my misguided thoughts were when I purchased the house of what the neighborhood could be, it wasn't, and it would never be. Additionally, in May of 2020, with George Floyd's murder, there was a lot of very understandable anger in the cities and the world in general. This existed in my neighborhood as well, where a block and a half over, a gas station was burned down. I understand the anger that comes with trying to be heard peacefully for so long and having no one listen. And eventually that anger boils over. I understand that. With that understanding, it is also important for you as an individual or as a family person, whatever. It is also important for you to feel safe inside the confines of your own home. And I've mentioned before, with my house standing out the way that it did on that street and drawing the attention that it did, at the time, I did not feel it was safe to be living there and having that attention on me. Second, my cool neighbors moved away early in the spring of 2020, and I felt lonely. I would have loved to stay living by them, but they moved south of the cities, and that just would have been a massive commute for me to my job. So, in conjunction with not wanting to be so close to Minneapolis proper, I wanted to be closer to where I worked, which was in a city called Maple Grove. This was not only for a convenience in my commute reasoning, but for pricing as well. Because while I could sell the Manor for such a profit, other houses were just as expensive. I could get a bit more bang for my buck if I moved away from Minneapolis towards the suburbs, and that did mean having to get more of a mid-century design house rather than a historic one, but I was ready for that challenge and for something new. Third, and perhaps most finitely, was the heartbreak that occurred in the house. I started a relationship in June of 2019, and it was arguably the most intense relationship I have ever been in, for better or worse. When it abruptly ended in late February of 2020, to say that it broke me would be an understatement. I still haven't, felt a pain like that in my life. 2 weeks after the breakup, COVID followed, which meant 2 months of essential solitude to sit and stew on my thoughts and look to distractions in the house that involved refinishing floors and putting in a yard and building a patio from scratch. I was in a very low spot, and ultimately, with the other factors at play as time had gone on, I couldn't look at the walls inside that house anymore because everywhere I looked it was filled with a memory of what had happened in there. Because of all of this, I wanted a fresh start. And it may sound shallow or pathetic or whatever you want to say, that I would abandon a house after putting so much work into it, but that's the truth. And those were the reasons. On a lighter note, about a month before selling the manor, I made a purchase of a custom piece of art that I wanted in order to commemorate owning the house. I'd been following an artist that goes by Newspaper Balloon on Instagram, and that name is below me right now. And she would occasionally paint portraits of people with a house or a landscape behind them. And she does all sorts of really beautiful watercolor paintings, but the ones that drew my attention were people in their houses. She would open up this service of commissioned work on her Etsy shop at random times, and she would say, like, you know, my next opening is going to be this date. So I ended up getting into it and securing one of the limited spots to get a portrait done. So it was one price for a human, another price for the background, another price for animals. But I did all of it because I wanted it all, and it was going to be special for me. So it was me, Paolo and Sophia, the house, all of it. She was so wonderful to work with, and she still does this sort of work as well, which I'll have to look into for the ranch as well as my current home, the estate. The piece was not finished by the time I moved into the ranch, but it did arrive there, and in a way was the perfect housewarming gift to myself. I framed it, and it still exists in a frame in my living room now. And it captures a moment in time that I will forever cherish, immortalizing my little family as we were then. When I look back at my time living in North Minneapolis, specifically photos and videos that have nothing to do with, you know, construction or painting or gardening or fixing burned down fences, there's so much of it that is just me with my cats. Being the first house that I actually owned, maybe this is me humanizing animals too much, but being that I owned the house, I felt like they knew it as well. Paolo and Sophia were along for the ride and have been for the last 14 years. So getting to share this journey with them as my familiars and little furry trusted confidants, that meant everything. They've been the constant in my life for a long time, and I'm grateful for the laughs they've given me and the tears that I've shed with them. And much of my time there was just me though, doing the things you need to do to keep your house running. And having said that, I realized that I don't have a million pictures of myself with friends in the manor. I didn't have many visitors here, and if I did, we weren't usually hanging out with our cameras ready. We were having conversations and enjoying the company, and maybe playing some games that got too heated or eating a great meal. But there are a couple moments with people that I'll never forget, a few visits that meant a lot and were fortunate enough to be captured. On the last day of owning the manor, I drove to the house with my laptop and my old iPad. I needed to write a final blog, one about saying goodbye to the manor, and I felt that it was only appropriate to do so inside the house. My intent was to record a video to mirror the video that I took the day I bought the house. I felt like I was saying goodbye to more than just a house, but to a friend as well, as odd as that may sound. What's funny, or rather what's interesting, is how long I feel that I've lived in the manor. I may have bought it and sold it within 27 months, but I never left it. Not really, at least. A part of me stayed with it, and a part of it has stayed with me. That part will never be gone. Not fully, not entirely. But in making season 1 of Restoring Sean and finally doing some sort of justice to the blood and sweat and tears that went into restoring the manor, I can put a lot of what I did and what happened to bed. Really, now I can say goodbye to the manor and what it meant to me. Here is the video walkthrough I recorded as a side-by-side to the original, only now because it was my time to leave. Porch here. And let's see. Okay, so we've got a little entryway here, and as soon as I figure out where all the lights are, there's a living room that goes through to the dining and the built-in, and that goes around to the kitchen, and there's the
light for the little entryway that I will zhush up and make it cute. This is the pantry and my nice new fridge that I asked for. And we're not gonna go downstairs yet, but we'll go upstairs. A little warm in here. So here is the guest room where y'all will be staying, and this will end up being the office. There's a closet there, and then a little hidden area for the poop boxes. And then we've got the bathroom with its clawfoot tub. It goes around there. And master bedroom with window outside. There's me. There's the garage that's leaning. And then this is technically a balcony, but I need to get it fixed. So that's all. That's the house. Who cares about the basement? And I hope you guys get to see it soon. And some of you did see it, and some of you didn't, and that's okay. But that's a wrap on the Manor. Try not to get emotional. So I have to write a blog now in the emptiness of downstairs, and then leave my key and say goodbye. So thanks for coming on the journey with me. A couple weeks until you get to see the new house, and we'll go from there.
And wearing the same shirt that I wore the day I purchased the Manor and the day that I left it, we can say goodbye, as that is all I have got for you today. Thank you so much for going on this journey with me as we dove into all of the work it took to bring the Manor back to life. I will be back in 3 weeks after taking a short summer break, with the next video releasing on Wednesday, July 24th. That is when we kick off season 2, and the topic switches to restoring the ranch, my second house. Please click the like button below and subscribe. That way you don't miss out on any of the good stuff that I have in store for you. And if it's not too much to ask, please share this video with a friend or family member or coworker, or on Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media service you use, because that would help me and it would get people to watch this a little bit more, and I think that'd be great also. I'd like to leave you with one final thought for today, and that is to ask what you would like to see more of going forward. So far, it's really been about what I did from a construction standpoint in remodeling, but there's not been much in terms of decor and why I chose what I chose and what an aesthetic would be for each space, yada yada, things of that nature. If that's something that interests you, or you have another idea of what you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments below, and I will oblige as much as I possibly can. You can also reach me through Instagram, or you can reach me on my official website, www.restoringshawn.com. And if you're on the website, you can also look at the services that I offer, because you can hire me. Some things are more likely if you are here in the Wisconsin area. Others are more likely if you live remotely. Either way, I would love to work with you. I would love to help you. Let's do stuff and things and make it good. And with that, my dearest viewer, take care, enjoy the rest of July, and I will see you soon. That is a wrap on season 1.